If you spent any time deep diving into Clone Wars lore, you've seen the full spectrum of galaxy-ending threats. Massive droid armies, planet-cracking superweapons, ruthless Sith, wielding endless dark side power, elite Jedi wielding perfectly honed lightsaber combat. Every single one of these threats plays by a clear set of galactic rules. Blasters burn flesh, sabers slice through metal and organic tissue alike. The Force lets you read intent, or hurl objects or cloud weak minds within strict limits. But there's one terrifying bioweapon that tosses every single established combat rule straight out the airlock, and it's the Geonosian brain worm. What I've labeled Protonilla geonosia for this breakdown, a parasitic organism that didn't just frighten separatist troopers and clone soldiers. It broke the Jedi Order's most sacred core assumption about how the Force keeps them safe. Let me start with the most unsettling truth up front. This parasite doesn't fight armies or starships or fortified bunkers from a distance. It attacks individual consciousness. It hijacks the very brain that makes a sentient being a unique person, stripping away free will without fully erasing the victim's awareness. Think about that for a second. You're trapped inside your own skull, fully awake and conscious, every memory and fear and emotion still locked away inside you, yet your body moves on a completely separate set of orders fed to it by a tiny worm coiled around your nervous system. That's not a standard battlefield horror. That's a living, endless psychological prison. And both the Republic and Separatists lived in constant terror of it for the entire Clone Wars conflict. This script isn't going to run through generic fleet battles or lightsaber duels. We're digging into the biological nightmare behind the worm, its ripple effects across every major faction, and the quiet, unspoken reason the Empire later purged nearly the entire Geonosian species off their homeworld. For any Jedi watching this, the Force is their ultimate safety net. It sharpens their reflexes, amplifies their senses, throws up mental barriers to block invasive thought manipulation, even lets them feel dark side presences long before a Sith steps into visual range. The entire Order trained for millennia under the belief that their spiritual bond to the cosmic force created an unbreakable buffer against outside mental control. Here's where the brain worm shatters all of that. It operates on a purely biological frequency, constant, silent, electrochemical synapse firing that the Force simply cannot register or counteract. The worm doesn't carry malice, anger, or any trace of dark side energy the Jedi can sense. It's just a primitive hive organism acting on raw survival instinct, no emotional signature to pick up on through Force attunement. That creates a fatal blind spot no Jedi training module ever prepared them to handle. By the time a Jedi's gut instinct screams that something is catastrophically wrong, the worm has already wrapped itself around critical neural tissue. The parasite doesn't just lock down their mind either. It steals their greatest strengths. All of that lightning-fast saber reflex, that precise Force control, that tactical battlefield intuition the Jedi spent decades mastering. The worm repurposes every single one of those skills to turn the Jedi against their own allies. Imagine watching your own lightsaber rise to strike your clone squad, unable to relax your grip or pull your arm back, fully conscious of every life you're about to take, with zero way to stop your own body's movements. That brand of trauma rippled through every Jedi battalion that encountered infected hosts, leaving permanent psychological scars that temple healers struggled to mend long after the battles wrapped. Officially, the Geonosians stood as core separatist allies. Archduke Poggle the Lesser answered directly to Count Dooku, supplying the Confederacy with battle droids, starship schematics, experimental weapons, and manufacturing facilities non-stop for years. But the brainworm hive mind answered to no separatist political agenda whatsoever. Queen Karina the Great and her brood had one singular, unchanging priority: expand the parasite's reach, infect as many organic hosts as possible, and propagate the hive across every star system within hyperspace travel range. Dooku's grand plan to overthrow the Republic and seize galactic authority meant absolutely nothing to the worm swarm. Political power plays, military conquest, treaty negotiations, None of those matter when your entire collective consciousness only craves more living bodies to occupy. Poggle didn't hide this bioweapon away in a classified testing lab either. He deployed brain worm infestations across dozens of active war zones intentionally, treating every separatist trooper, droid commander, and organic officer as disposable hardware for the Hive to seize. Rank, battlefield loyalty, decorated combat records, personal devotion to the separatist cause. None of those protections existed against the Queen's swarm. Any living being within Geonosian-held territory could get selected as a new host at any moment, with no warning or exemption. This brutal, disposable mindset slowly eroded whatever fragile unity the Separatist alliance held together. Troops began distrusting their own commanding officers, wondering if their general or squad mate might turn into a mindless puppet mid-fight without a single warning sign. Word quickly spread through Separatist ranks that the worm didn't only target flesh-and-blood combatants. It could indirectly seize control of tactical droids and high-ranking droid commanders too, as long as an infected organic being stood at the controls to feed the Hive's neural commands into machine data streams. This revelation cranked internal paranoia up to catastrophic levels. Officers avoided close quarters with their own troopers, refused to share transport vessels, and hesitated to coordinate joint operations for fear of cross-contamination. Even the Sith themselves grew wary of the parasite, despite their willingness to embrace every cruel, manipulative tactic imaginable. The Sith thrive on calculated power grabs and ordered domination of lesser beings, but the hive mind only acts on unfiltered primal instinct. It can't be bargained with, threatened, or corrupted with promises of greater power. What started as Dooku's prized secret weapon devolved into an out-of-control crisis even Darth Sidious and his dark side techniques couldn't contain. Let's break down exactly how this parasite hijacks a living nervous system, because its evolutionary design makes its horror far more tangible than any generic mind control trope you've seen in Star Wars media. The worm's primary entry point is the nasal cavity, an exposed, poorly defended soft tissue zone almost no combat armor fully seals off. Once it slips past nasal membranes, it travels inward to coil tightly around the host's brainstem, the core regulatory hub that manages all motor function, pain response, and conscious awareness. Republic medical droids catalogued a unique neural enzyme secreted by the parasite mid-infestation, codenamed Hive Zin 7, a compound that dulls native nerve signals without fully destroying nerve tissue entirely. This chemical cocktail lets the worm override every native bioelectrical pulse firing through the brain while simultaneously cranking the host's physical performance up to extreme, unsustainable peaks. Every skill the victim learned over their lifetime stays fully intact: a clone trooper's pinpoint blaster accuracy, a starfighter pilot's sharp evasive maneuvering, a Jedi's flawless saber forms, a mercenary's close-quarters grappling technique. The parasite just strips away every self-preservation instinct that would normally hold those skills in check. An infected trooper will sprint headfirst into overwhelming artillery fire, stand unflinching in the path of lightsaber strikes, and fight until their body sustains fatal structural damage, no pain response slowing them down at all. The nociceptors, the sensory receptors that transmit pain signals to the brain, get completely suppressed by Hive Zin 7, creating relentless, fearless killing puppets that no standard military formation can easily neutralize. Clinical scans taken on recovered unconscious hosts recorded roughly a 40% spike in baseline physical output while under full parasitic control, a temporary biological overclock that burns through the body's stamina reserves at an alarming rate. On top of that terrifying combat capability, the worm boasts absurd environmental adaptability that lets infestations spiral out of control aboard starships, space stations, and isolated orbital outposts. It withstands brutal sub-zero freezing temperatures and even short bursts of raw outer space vacuum without immediate cellular breakdown. That meant a single infected crew member aboard a medical frigate, cargo hauler, or patrol cruiser could spark a ship-wide outbreak in hours. Trapped crew members had zero access to external rescue fleets. Once hyperspace jumps cut them off from Republic or Separatist command, forced to navigate a drifting metal hull, slowly turning into a self-sustaining breeding ground for the parasite. Every sealed compartment became a potential ambush point, every trusted crewmate a potential mindless attacker waiting to strike. The most famous, haunting case study of this infestation unfolded aboard the TB-73 Republic medical frigate, a vessel built exclusively to transport and treat wounded clone troopers pulled straight off frontline battlefields. What began as a routine humanitarian relief mission devolved into unrelenting horror in a matter of hours, and two core characters we all recognize fell victim to the parasite's reach. Barriss Offee, a highly skilled Mirialan Jedi Knight with years of frontline combat experience, and Trapper, a veteran clone pilot who survived countless brutal Separatist ambushes before boarding the medical ship. Comrades who'd fought side by side for standard tours of duty transformed into unthinking assailants overnight, forcing the remaining uninfected crew to make unthinkable choices just to stay alive. Ahsoka Tano's arc through this crisis lays bare the crushing moral conflict the brainworm forces every Jedi to confront. The Jedi Code binds every knight and Padawan to preserve all innocent life, forbidding unnecessary killing of beings trapped outside their own control. The catch here? Every infected person remains fully conscious inside their hijacked body. They can feel every wound they inflict, every strike landed on former friends, every scream echoing through the ship, yet they cannot speak, cannot signal for help, cannot lift a finger to stop their own violent movements. Ahsoka could see the silent agony trapped behind the blank, glassy eyes of her infected allies, yet there existed no safe, reliable way to extract the worm without terminating the host's life entirely. That internal torment stretched her compassion and self-discipline to absolute breaking point. The Republic's greatest tactical advantage, the unbreakable trust and camaraderie shared between Jedi generals and clone trooper battalions, suddenly morphed into a deadly vulnerability against a transmissible hive bioweapon. Loyalty and friendship became chains trapping every uninfected survivor aboard that doomed frigate. Long after the Clone Wars' final battle wrapped and Order 66 reshaped the galaxy forever, the shadow of the Geonosian brainworm lingered across galactic historical archives. It stands as one of the only bioweapons in all Star Wars canon capable of neutralizing Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One himself, and every other top-tier Force user through pure biological interference alone. No lightsaber duel, no dark side lightning, no massive droid regiment could match that feat. It proves an unshakable, uncomfortable truth. Even the galaxy's most powerful Force wielders carry an unavoidable weakness against tiny, primitive, parasitic life forms that operate entirely outside the Force's sphere of detection and influence. To contain the existential threat the worm posed, the Republic's Senate eventually authorized extreme, galaxy-wide countermeasures that the later Empire carried to even deadlier extremes. The Geonosian species, the sole originators and natural carriers of Protonilla geonosia, were systematically hunted down and pushed to the brink of total extinction. Every major galactic faction unanimously classified the hive mind parasite as a greater long-term threat than the entire Sith Order combined. The Sith chase territory, authority, and personal immortality through manipulation of the dark side. The brainworm's sole drive is to erase individual free will across every inhabited star system in the galaxy, turning every sentient species into passive hive hardware. When forced to weigh these two catastrophic threats against one another, every governing power opted to wipe out the parasite's native source entirely. Even thousands of years after the Clone Wars, through the rise and fall of the Galactic Empire and the birth of the New Republic, the legend of the Geonosian brainworm remains a grim, unignorable cautionary tale. The galaxy developed faster starship engines, deadlier energy cannons, smarter autonomous droid units, and deeper force training methodologies across centuries of technological and spiritual advancement. None of that progress creates a reliable defense against a parasitic hive mind driven only by primal hunger to multiply. Elite reinforced armor, high-powered projectile weaponry, decades of force meditation. All of these safeguards fail against an enemy that invades from inside your own body, bypassing every external layer of protection you can build. When we recap the Clone Wars as a whole, most viewers fixate on iconic one-on-one lightsaber duels, massive capital ship fleet clashes, the slow corruption of Anakin Skywalker, and the eventual fall of the Jedi Order at Palpatine's hands. The Brainworm story digs far deeper into the hidden dangers of unregulated biological warfare, though. It reminds us the galaxy's most terrifying foes don't always carry polished Beskar armor or glowing red lightsabers. Sometimes the worst horror creeps in through invisible microscopic lifeforms, silently seizing your mind, your movement, and your identity before you register a single warning sign. This parasitic nightmare doesn't just function as a memorable Clone Wars horror side plot either. It leaves a lasting thematic question hanging over every piece of Star Wars media that touches on bodily autonomy and free will. How thin the dividing line truly sits between civilized galactic society and unthinking primal biological chaos. Every generation of Force users, military commanders, and civilian settlers that comes after will still carry the weight of this lesson. The most devastating threats don't always arrive from outer space. Sometimes they burrow straight inside you.